A number of factors led up to my exorcism. Okay, I think it started when I was real little. I decided to have this kind of fantasy league with the neighborhood kids. I was really into fantasy books and comic books and like anime, and I really wanted to like come up with stories about these like spirits of the woods. So I had each different house on my neighborhood block, like their backyard was the different home of a spirit from the woods. Like, this is the bog spirit, this is the air spirit, and this is the forest spirit. And then we would write all these like stories about them. But we had to stop when the youngest brother of one of the houses started talking about it in church like they were real spirits. And we had to be like, oh, we gotta cut this off, because he's starting to form this into a real religion. Even though we do have totems in the woods right now, it might be a real religion. But we're like, okay, let's stop it. And then years later, I got into Ozzy Osbourne, and this was before this is very important. It was before the reality show. It was before the Osbournes, where he became like the doddering old father figure who's like, oh, wet myself. That wasn't the Ozzy Osbourne I like looked up to. All the Ozzy Osbourne I knew was like, he ate a bat on stage. He bit off the head of a bat on stage. He survived so many drugs. He is hard rock. I was really into Black Sabbath, and one of the things I discovered for the first time, because this is like early 2000s, I found eBay exists, which was bad. And I also knew where my parents' credit card was, which was worse, because it seemed like eBay was like a fun game you could play. Because you could bid, but you could lose. But you could keep bidding, and maybe you'll win. It's not my money. And this is how I got a $40 index card signed by Ozzy Osbourne, a concert poster, and a $100 action figure that was about this big. Actually, it was like $150. It was about this big, and it was made by Todd McFarlane. It's Ozzy Osbourne as a werewolf, and when you pressed its belly, it went, bark at the moon. That's all it did. And sometimes you press it and go, oh, bark at the moon. And I was like really into it. And my parents were super pissed when they found it. I was like, what are all these bills from? I was like, there's a game called eBay. It comes in the mail. But what really tipped them off was I went to Boy Scout camp. And we were waiting. One thing that happens, by this point, it's like 13, 14, which means you're like an elder in Boy Scout camp. And you're like in charge of the troop, and all the little kids look up to you. And there was an ice cream social, and slowly, one by one, each of the troops goes down to the ice cream social. And we were waiting for them to get us. And so we were like, oh, let's have some fun while we're waiting. So I just put on Black Sabbath, and we started just dancing around the campfire and then just taking off our shirts and like whipping them around the campfire as we're like, bark at the moon, man. Well, that's Ozzy Osbourne, but it's Black Sabbath stuff like War Pigs, the stuff. And then we got in trouble, and they never came to get us, and we found out it was because when they came to us, it was because I was like it looked like I was holding a little kid over the fire and just screaming like, hail Ozzy Osbourne, hail Black Sabbath, hail Black Sabbath. And they sent me home early from Boy Scout camp because they thought I was worshiping Satan, because I was instructing all these kids to basically dance around a fire naked to Black Sabbath. I understand their point. The ride home from Boy Scout camp was the quietest ride I ever took part in. I would try to turn on the radio, and my dad would just turn it off instantly. Mostly because I was trying to tune it into like WAAF, which was radio station in Massachusetts, and it's just all hard rock music, and he's like, no! And he wouldn't talk. He didn't reprimand me, he didn't do anything. He just didn't say anything at all. And we finally got home, and he just sent me to my room, didn't say anything at all. Next day, I came down, slept in, but I came down, and my entire living room was filled with the oldest people from church. And I couldn't understand why. I was just like, what's Mrs. Baum doing here? It's just like all these like people that couldn't quite see or hear anymore. And they're all just got to gather around. And my pastor was there, Richard, and he's like, well, we want to have a talk. Can you sit down? And I was like, okay. He's like, you've been dealing a lot with Satan recently. I'm like, listen, is this just because of Black Sabbath? We found all the things you bought off eBay and brought all the Ozzy Osbourne stuff, and I will not forget my pastor just holding up this action figure and just pressing like, look at this. Pressing it, just back at the mound. This is Satan's handiwork. You're making a deal with the devil. You think you're making bids on eBay? You're making bids with your afterlife. I'm like, okay. It's like, we need to come together and we need to get this out of you. I'm like, I didn't realize we were that type of church. Is this an exorcism? And he's like, we like to think of it as an agreement with Jesus. We're breaking it was very lawful. It was like, we're breaking your agreement with Satan. You're making a new one with your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm like, okay. Is there paperwork I have to sign? I didn't ask that. I was like 13. I was crying. I was just like, what did you do? I was a good boy. That was me. So I'm sounding like I'm very witty right now, but this is all just like, ugh. So he's like, okay, so what do we have to do? It's like, this is all we have to do. We're gonna lay our hands on you. And he wasn't Southern, it was Massachusetts, but I don't know. Every time I tell this story, I don't know how to like describe him without going like, oh yeah, I'm gonna lay your hands on you. And all of the oldest people from church just kind of gathered around me, and they put their hand like on my chest, on my back, just like totally surrounding me. And they just kind of like, it felt like they were kind of pushing me back and forth. Like I was just I don't know. They were just like they were testing me like a trust fall, but just like these old, weak, withered hands just going back and forth, just caressing my young, supple body. No, didn't get that far. But they were just pushing me back and forth, and they just said like, you reject Satan and you embrace Jesus Christ. Repeat after me. You reject Satan and you embrace Jesus Christ. I reject Satan and I embrace you embrace Jesus Christ. And that happened for a while, and then everyone just started crying around me, including me, because I was just in fear of my life. And then they just left. And that was it. And I was grounded for like a couple weeks, but it was a nice, clean exorcism. I suppose. They got rid of all my eBay stuff. They sold it again on eBay. They went on eBay. They made a profit from my stuff, which I still haven't seen to this day. But they made a profit. But this is really what this inspired me to do. When I went to college, I went to Emerson in Boston, but I took a trip to Salem, Massachusetts, because I heard there was something opening up called the Satanic Temple. And I went to the Satanic Temple, and I signed up. And now I'm an official member of the Satanic Temple, and I recommend you all do it, including the young child here. So thank you, everyone, and hail Satan.